sunwheelmagic.com, thunderwizard.com. Okay, so today I want to talk to you about what has become known as the out of India theory, which says that the Indo-European language, culture, and religions have their origins in India as opposed to Central Asia. Okay? This theory, the out of India theory, is actually a reaction to the previous Aryan migration theory, which has been proven false by the Paleolithic Continuity Paradigm. But basically it's a reaction to that earlier theory, and it basically turns it on its head. It says that the Indo-European peoples and religions came from India as opposed to somewhere else. And I'm saying that this, while I sympathize with the reasons behind why this theory is being promoted, I disagree with it because I believe it is based on an emotionally driven agenda, and people are allowing their personal feelings and their racial biases to color their feelings. So basically what I'm saying is that this theory is based on a false assumption about race and its connection to the Indo-European languages. So, before I get any further, I need you to do a few things. Otherwise, I can guarantee you, you will not understand the full context of what I'm talking about. The first thing I need you to do is I need you to go onto your computer and I need you to Google Paleolithic Continuity Paradigm. That basically says, in a nutshell, that the Indo-European language has its origins in Paleolithic Africa at least 50,000 years ago, probably tens of thousands of years before that, with the first modern humans. So that says that the Indo-European language does not have its origins anywhere in these other areas we've been talking about. Not in Central Asia, not in India, not in Europe, but in Africa. So this completely changes the dynamic. And if you don't understand this fully, then you will be reacting to what I say from a bunch of false assumptions that have been proven false by the Paleolithic Continuity Paradigm. Second thing I need you to do is I need you to go, and if you're not familiar with it, I need you to familiarize yourself with the previous Aryan migration and conquest theory, which said that the Indo-European peoples had their genesis in Central Asia 7,000 years ago. They exploded all over the world, spreading their language, culture, and religion, and this is where all Indo-European language comes from, including Sanskrit and the Vedic religion. Okay, that's the second thing. Just be familiar with it. Third thing I need you to do then is go and do some research on the out of India theory, and look at the people who are promoting this theory, get the feel behind it. You'll find out that the last two things, the previous Aryan migration and conquest theory and the out of India theory, both come from a false assumption which says that, well, there's three false assumptions, and I'll read them to you. First false assumption is that Indo-European has its origins in Asia, Anatolia, or India. Okay, these have all been proven false. You have to take that out of the equation. Indo-European language comes from Africa, Paleolithic Africa. The second false assumption that was shared by the first theory, the first Aryan conquest theory, is this. Since Aryans and Europeans share common language root, there must be an ethnic connection. False. Okay, you have to get rid of that assumption. Third false assumption, this is that the out of India theory says, since Sanskrit originated in India, then Europeans share a common language, and then therefore Europeans were conquered by the Indo-Aryans. False on a couple of different levels, okay? So the problem lies with connecting race to the origin of the Indo-European language. And people are making logical but faulty conclusions based on the information that they had. The main assumption that is false is that the Indo-European language has some relatively recent origins. people didn't realize they were making that assumption, but if they, couple hundred years ago, people couldn't think past, a few thousand years. So to go back 50,000 years, and people didn't even know where human beings came from. So the idea that human beings came from Africa and that their ethnicities changed over tens of thousands of years due to climate, differences, this couldn't enter their mind. So they made a common misconception, an understandable one, which was that, well, this must have some, Indo-European language must have some origin with a common racial culture somewhere. Where is that racial culture? And so people made the conclusion that the Aryans were the progenitors of all Europeans, and since Europeans were light-skinned people, then therefore the Aryans must have been light-skinned, and therefore the Aryans were these light-skinned warriors that came into India and conquered India and all that. The out of India theory, you can understand. The British come in, and they conquer India and they colonize it. And what the British did is they used this false misconception about the origin of the Indo-European language. And they made the conclusion, which was well understood at that time, that the Aryans were light-skinned people related to the Europeans. Therefore, the British were more Aryan than the Indians. This is what they thought. I'm telling you this is false. This is what they said. So you can imagine if you're a native Indian and you hear this foreigner come in who is learning about your language and your culture and religion and coming to these conclusions and saying that they were more related to their ancestors than they were. I mean, nobody is going to be able to hear that well. They're going to get very upset. And so it's only natural people are going to want to defend their own ethnicity and their language, their ancestry, their religion. And so to combat that, they just simply turned it on its head, taking the same false assumptions that the Aryans were the progenitors of the Indo-European language. They took that false assumption and turned it around and said, no, it's the other way around. That the Aryans came from India and then they spread their language and culture into Europe. And so you have these two conflicting theories. And these theories are battling it out basically over race. And while I completely 100% sympathize with the out of India theory people, based on that, I think that combating racism is absolutely extremely important, and combating the false assumptions of the British, who made the assumption that they were racially connected to the Aryans because of language. I absolutely completely agree with the need to do that. However, I disagree with the assumption that we have to turn it on its head. There's a third option. The third option is that stop everything. There is a truth, a partial truth to this, which is at some point in time, there was an ethnic homogeneity between the speakers of the Indo-European peoples. But that origin does not exist anywhere in the Northern Hemisphere. That origin is in Paleolithic Africa, at least 50,000 years ago. That being said, that means that the first speakers of the Indo-European language were dark-skinned African people. These African people, around 50,000 years ago, because of climate change, were able to make their way up through the Sahara Desert. They made their way up into the Middle East and then spread all over into Europe and into Central Asia. And over tens of thousands of years, these people's ethnicity changed due to climate factors. But the language stayed the same. So what happens is, 40,000 years later, at the end of the last ice age, you have people who are speaking a similar language over this huge, large landmass of Europe and Central Asia. But their ethnicities by this point have changed. The DNA has changed. Some of them have different skin color, some of them have different hair color, some of them have different eye color, some of them have different facial features, but they still speak a similar language. One of those tribes, only one of them, was called the Aryans. And about, I think it's about 7,000 or 8,000 years ago, there's a climate shift that starts happening in the grasslands of Central Asia where they live. And so their climate starts changing and it becomes inhospitable for them to farm and to live as they did. So they start moving south, looking for more lush places to live. As they go, they start conquering whatever peoples are there, and some of them were probably Indo-European. And then they continue to move down until they get to the Himalayas and northern India, which we now call Pakistan. And they find there the lush grasslands and the forests that they used to have on what is now the plains of Central Asia. This is where they write the Vedas, and they make it very clear that they come from someplace outside of there. They don't say where because they're not interested in where they came from, they're interested in where they're going. And they make it very clear that they are culturally, linguistically, and possibly racially different from the original people that are in India, who we call the Dravidians. So this is very clear. This is attested to by the Vedas, and it's also very clear in the archaeological record and in the geological record. This is all very clear. This only becomes a problem when you start talking about race. And when the British used the false assumption that they were more ethnically connected to the Aryans than the indigenous Indian people were, then the Indians adopted a bunch of false assumptions that the British were giving them and turned it on its head. And now the out of India theory is really all about conquering racism. It doesn't have its roots in objective thinking or science. And what I'm saying to you is this: if you take the whole racial component out of the argument altogether, there is no need for Indians to defend themselves against British racism, because British people are descended from Indo-Europeans just like the Indians are, except that their connection doesn't happen somewhere in Central Asia, it happens in Africa. So right here, this is where we all came from. Got me? Aryans ended up over here, Europeans ended up over here, Aryans came down into India, right? 7,000 years ago. They are racially different from the Dravidians, but they are also racially different from the Europeans. I myself am descended from people who came to this country from England. I can trace my lineage all the way back to the Pilgrims. Now, there's no shame in saying that my ancestors came from a different place and traveled here, unless you put some kind of superiority to the British. If you say British are superior to Americans, and then there becomes a problem. Same thing here. As long as you take out this idea that the Aryans were superior, racially or culturally or whatever, then there's no shame in saying that, you know, if you're a native Indian, there's no shame in saying that your ancestors came from someplace else. Okay? So that's all I'm saying. If I haven't made my point at by this time, there's nothing I can say or do. But the bottom line is we got to take our personal biases and our personal desires. And I understand the desire to combat racism, but that is a separate issue. To combine combating racism and trying to stick it in this giant out of India theory is a waste of time, and it is unnecessary. The Indian people do not need to use that in order to defend their absolute right to say that they are descended from the Aryan people who created the Vedic civilization.